I was just coming into church this morning early, and the first sound I heard as I came through the door was the choir rehearsing. And I thought to myself, I'm in church. I'm in church. And the second thing I thought was, it's no small thing in this divided world that somewhere people still sing together. No matter what else is going on. Here, at least, people still sing together. Don't undercount that. It is a miracle. I appreciate the choir. Thank you so much. You can't blame a mother for trying. If you were listening to the reading, you know that she did her best. But what you missed in that reading, because it happens just a couple of verses before, is that Jesus had just finished telling his disciples for like the 50th time that they were going up to Jerusalem now, where he was going to be humiliated and killed. And just as he finishes saying that to them, Mom, mother of the Zebedee boys, comes out of the crowd and says to him, I want seats in the kingdom next to your throne for my kids, completely missing the fact that the only throne he's going to be sitting on anytime soon is the cross. The other disciples, what do? They suss out the power grab. They know what's going on here, that the Zebedee boys want the whole pie, and there may not be pieces left for them. So what does the gospel reading say? It says they got mad. They were infuriated. You can just hear them thinking, what about us? What about us? Where's our piece of the pie? So much for group cohesion and brotherly love. Now they're at each other's throats. Over what? Status. Now these guys have been Jesus' disciples for more than 3 years. How could they be spending even an ounce of energy fighting about who gets to be first? How could they miss his point so completely? How could we? Because we've been listening to him for 2,000 years, and we know his drill, don't we? The greatest among you must be the least. The last will be first. But the penny hasn't dropped for us either. Really, not completely. We're all trying to get somewhere in this life, right? And for most of us, somewhere means we're trying to get ahead. We might not be particularly driven. I know I'm not. But I'd still like to end up at the front of the line. You may not be trying to rule the universe, but you wouldn't say no to being the top dog at work or in your social circle or at school. We may not be hugely ambitious, but if there's a ladder of success, most of us would rather go up than down. Which is to say, by the gospel's standards, we've got life all wrong. I have a colleague who used to preach just up the road a piece, and he once talked about an event in India called the slow cycle race. When the gun goes off, nobody pedals madly out of the chute. They move as slowly as they possibly can along the track, which is 10 meters long. The best racers sit immobile for long stretches of time, because the goal of the race is to come in last. Now, if you didn't know that, you'd show up for the race with your bicycle, the gun would go off, you'd cycle as fast as you could, you'd break the finish line tape with nobody else in sight, you'd leave them all in the dust, but there would be no cheers and no trophy because you would have come in last. You'd have lost the race. Or rather, you would have won the wrong race. And Jesus knows that this is the sad possibility in every life. We might win the wrong race. We say we're his followers, but when he goes off on his way, bending his knee, washing people's feet, feeding the unwashed masses, rejecting power and influence and authority, refusing to defend his own reputation, refusing even to save his own life, we say, oh, look at the time, and we go flying off in our upwardly mobile trajectory of life. Now, we start young climbing the ladder. Now, we mean to encourage our kids to use their gifts well, to be their best selves, but there's so much pressure in the atmosphere to win, to take the right classes, to join the right clubs, to play the right sports, to get into the right college, that we end up teaching them to worship achievement. I know, participation trophies, they make us feel virtuous and good, but honestly, secretly, maybe not so secretly, we like it better when they win. And they know it. We have the therapist's bills to prove it. Loser is a label some kids don't survive. Sometimes it's like that in our churches too. Not this one, but in some churches. Some congregations measure their success by the numbers. People in the pews, cash in the bank, impressive facilities, snazzy websites, professional branding. And these days, big, active, busy bells and whistles churches aren't enough for some Christians. They want to install Christianity itself at the right and left hands, not of Jesus in the kingdom, but of the president in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, back on that hard road trudging toward Jerusalem, where the people who sit in those high places are getting ready to kill him, Jesus keeps telling the people who claim to love him that his kingdom is not of this world, that it's alive and well among the lowly, that you'll find it if you lose yourself, if you're small like a child, if you stop lying awake nights plotting how to beat your competition to the top of the heap, if instead you bend your knee and serve your neighbor, that is to say, if you find your way down. Well, what does that look like? A downward way of life? I wish I could tell you exactly, but it's not the same for everybody. There's no one blueprint or manual that's going to work for everybody, because no one's life is exactly the same as anyone else's. For some of history's greatest saints, I'm going to talk about a couple of them in the forum. I hope some of you will be able to come. For some of history's greatest saints, following Jesus on his downward way meant a complete and radical reorientation of their life. A clean break with their past. A clean break with their families, their privilege, their wealth, their comfort, so that they could be free of everything except trust in God and humble service of the neighbor. But most of the time, Jesus' downward way is not so dramatic. It's more everyday, composed of small gestures, little acts, changes of attitude that all add up over time to a deep and beautiful life of service, generosity, and humility. And some of history's greatest saints look like that too. Each of us has to find our own way down. What matters is not the exact form it takes. What matters is that every day we choose to use whatever, big or little, privilege or authority, influence, knowledge, wealth that we may have, not to serve ourselves and our own interests, but to serve the interests, the bodies and souls of our neighbors, and to help to assure that they have human dignity in a world that's constantly trying to rob them of it. What matters, as Francis of Assisi said on his deathbed after a life of service that left him with nothing, what he said was that we need to find what is ours to do and do it. Each way down will look different. But the first step on the path downward, I think, is the same for everyone. That first step consists of sitting with Jesus' most relentless question: why is it that you do almost anything not to occupy the lowest rungs? What are you so afraid of? He doesn't want us to be afraid. He wants to spare us the anxiety that accompanies so much upward striving, the heart attacks, the isolation, the fear of failure, the envy and the anger at other people's success, the rupture in relationships. Think Zebedee boys and their mom. He doesn't want us to be that person who pedals furiously to get to the finish line, and then when we finally cross it, we find out we're all alone. It's so that we don't end up alone. It's so that no one ends up alone that Jesus calls us to a downward way. Hannah, did you study with Henry Nouwen at Yale? No? Well, Henry Nouwen was a beloved spiritual teacher and writer who taught at Yale for many years and also at Harvard Divinity School. Henry was Dutch, but he lived a great part of his life here in the United States. And the last time he visited home, he went back to the Netherlands, he noticed something about that country's really sort of surprising but massive rising prosperity. And he noticed that the rising prosperity of the Netherlands was causing huge changes in society. People had come way up in the world, but they were more anxious, more competitive than ever before. The more they had, the more envious they became, and the more wary they were of each other. And he wrote in a beautiful letter to a friend, he wrote, "Success has isolated a lot of people here and made them lonely. Meetings between people, when people try to get together, it happens on the way to something else, on the way to other things. There's always something else that's more consequential, more important, more pressing. The ordinary, simple little things have to take a back seat to something you really must be doing, to that concert that you really must hear, to that country you must visit, or that event you've got to attend, the fashion you have to adopt. You need to see and be seen. You need to be somebody. You need to get ahead. And the higher up you rise on the ladder," he wrote, "the harder it is just to be together, to sing together, to pray together, and to celebrate life in a spirit of thanksgiving. Just to be together. That's the why of it. That's the grace of it. That's the blessing that's hidden in each step of the downward way. For when we're not angling up and above and beyond other people, when we're not pushing somebody out of the way as we strive to get to the front of the line, when we're willing to go down a rung or two, or even remain out of sight at the rear, when we choose to serve others gladly and not lord it over them or remain aloof from their need, when we live gratefully as if on bended knee, not only do we find Jesus waiting for us down there, feeding us, healing us, washing our feet, we also finally find each other.